Before I move on to my next project, I kind of wanted to make a sort of post-project video about this pouch that I made. The first thing I want to do is just go over the tools that I used. Obviously, I used a sewing machine outfitted with the largest needle I could get to accommodate that bonded nylon thread that I used. And I also obviously used my big sketch pad to make our pattern, and a pen and a ruler, and that's all I used to make our pattern. I didn't have a fancy square or anything like that, protractor or nothing, just a 12-inch ruler, pen and paper. That's all I used to make the pattern. And obviously I also used scissors to cut our material, and for various reasons, I had a seam ripper, just a normal color pencil. I didn't use any kind of tailor's chalk or anything like that. And I had these little clips here that I basically got for free as when I ordered a plastic snap fastener kit for a different project that I worked on a while back. And they basically just threw in these to say, hey, thanks for using our website. I didn't even know what they were at first because I never used these before. But if you don't have these, you could always just use traditional sewing pins, binder clips, basting tape, whatever suits your fancy. But I just wanted to go over that because, that's all I used. And if you wanted to do a project like this, you really don't need that much, If you got the sewing machine, it's not that hard. That being said, some tools I will invest in the future is a better pair of scissors. These are just dollar store scissors that I found laying around the house. They're not that great, but I'll be investing in a better pair. And maybe in a clear acrylic ruler, and maybe I will invest in some kind of square, just make cutting material that much easier. Maybe some weights to hold the material down if I do that. And I really do want a rotary cutter and a self-healing cutting mat. And that's not so much for cutting the cordura, but when I was cutting the mesh that I used to make our interior pocket, I never realized how hard it was to cut mesh in a straight line, especially with cheap scissors. So those are some tools that I definitely will be investing in the future. What I want to go over is basically just how this project worked out for me, and for the most part I'm pretty happy with our pouch that we made here, except for one problem, and that's when you pick the bag up, you can see that the pouch here really sags, and that's kind of not what I envisioned originally. I kind of wanted the pouch to always just kind of lay flat against the main pack, and every time you pick it up it just sags now. And that's more just a cosmetic thing. It's not about functionality. I have some ideas about how to fix that maybe I'll do in the future. A few of them involve modifying the bag itself with some extra attachment points, but that's not really something I want to do, is modify the actual backpack. If I'm going to do anything, I want it done to the pouch. And that's just so if anybody has any notions of creating a project like this themselves, then maybe I can show them how I corrected my mistake so they don't actually have to go fixing the bag. And one thing I will do is put some bar tack stitching on these MOLLE straps here. That way, when I attach the pouch, the bar tack will be right up against this first loop on the main pack, and hopefully that'll keep it held a little straighter. I really haven't worked out too much what I'm gonna do to the pouch besides that, but hopefully that'll help fix some of that sag. The next thing I want to go over is just some things I could have done different, or maybe you want to do different if you plan on making a similar bag. And the first thing being, I wasn't too satisfied with how the stitching turned out on some of these MOLLE straps. Some of them were fine, but a couple of them the stitching didn't turn out so great. And one of them that was particularly bad, I ended up removing all the stitching and starting over. But all I really had to do to fix it was adjust the tension on my sewing machine. It was a simple fix, but in the future I'll just try to remember those settings on my sewing machine when I'm sewing through 2 layers of this nylon webbing. If I do make this same bag again, what I'm going to do different, instead of these MOLLE straps disappearing into the seam and then just, you know, bar tacking across the seam there, I'm just going to have the MOLLE straps in sort of right here, and then just do a box X stitch. And the reason I'm going to do that is because when I was sewing this back panel onto the top panel, just going through those layers of Cordura plus the nylon and, you know, 2 layers of grosgrain ribbon, it was asking my machine to do a lot, and it was kind of struggling to get through that. So it wouldn't be a problem if I had like an industrial heavy-duty sewing machine like a Sailrite or Juki or something, but just the domestic machine that I was working on, that was kind of a lot. Another thing I want to do in the future is the way I did my grosgrain ribbon was I just kind of had everything come to a right angle, and then I just cut 4 separate pieces of grosgrain ribbon for each side, and just kind of have them overlap. And the reason I did that was basically just because it was easy. I mean, it was just simple to sew at a right angle. I wasn't trying to bend anything around. And the reason I like having it at a right angle is because the math is easy. I know exactly how much material I need. I'm not trying to do any kind of complicated math to figure out, a rounded corner. But in the future, I would like to do more of a rounded corner because, you can see the way I did my corners here, it has a tendency to want to suck inward towards the inside of the bag, and that's just a cosmetic thing. It functions fine, but cosmetically it just kind of gets sucked in, and it doesn't look that great. But yeah, in the future I'd like to do some rounded corners. And then I wanted to do zigzag stitches on my PALS webbing, but my machine just couldn't seem to handle it. Maybe I can try and figure out the settings on my sewing machine to do better stitching. I mean, the way the stitching is done on my Blackhawk bag, that's probably done by, a programmable, bar tack stitching machine that just does that one stitch. It probably goes forward, back and forward, and then does a zigzag stitch or some variation of that. And I wanted my stitching to look a lot more like that. I figure it looks a little more professional, and it probably could be stronger. But I was looking at some of the stitching on a 511 pouch that I have, and they do their stitching the same way. They just go forward, back and forward, and just do a locking sort of bar tack stitch, something like that. And I've seen tactical tailor bags that were the same way. And these are reputable brands, so if they're doing their stitching like that, I guess it's not so bad that I'm doing the same thing. Another thing I might do different if I were to sew another bag like this was I originally had no intention of doing any interior pockets, and I ended up doing this mesh pocket just because we had the material that I salvaged from a piece of luggage. And I wanted to kind of do something cool just for the video and give it a little something extra. But if I was going to do this again, I might put this mesh pocket on the front panel instead of the back panel. And I would instead on the back panel have maybe some sort of a 40D nylon divider that had little different pockets on the inside, just where I could put all my different Leatherman and flashlight and stuff that I tend to carry all the time. If anybody's wondering what I carry in this bag all the time, I usually have my hat, you know, a hygiene kit, just a pair of gloves in case the weather gets cold, you know, I usually have my battery, and then there's just some various, I always have a sewing kit, of course, and then I always have, you know, various sort of EDC items that I carry every day, you know, Leatherman flashlight and stuff like that, and I like to have that sort of stuff in individual pockets. I ended up putting it all in that mesh pocket just because, you know, now I have it. But maybe I'll do that different on the next one. And then another thing that I'll do different next time I make a zippered pouch that I didn't think of, or I wasn't really thinking of when I put this one together, was the way I attached the zipper to these pieces of material was I ended up using 4 different stitches, you know, on the same spot. And I wanted it double stitched, but what I should have done was have one stitch sew the zipper to the material itself, then do the fold that we did, and then do the 2 rows of stitches. So I really should have only had 3 rows, but I wasn't thinking ahead when I did that, but next time I will. And another thing that, looking back, I ended up using this number 10 YKK zipper because it's what I had. I originally wanted to use a number 8, but I didn't have any number 8, so I ended up using a number 10. But this is a pretty big zipper. I mean, it's not absurd or nothing, but it's a large zipper for this pouch, and I think a number 8 would have been better. A number 5, which I also have, would have probably been a little bit small. You know, it would have functioned fine, but it would have seemed a little small. I wanted something a little larger, but I think I'll use a number. I'll just buy some number 8 zippers the next time I make this particular pouch, if I do. And maybe I'll put 2 layers on the bottom panel, just to, you know, give it a little bit more durability, because, you know, I've got this thing attached to my backpack. It's constantly being thrown down on the concrete, stuff like that, you know, and it's got all kinds of heavy crap inside of it. So, you know, it's probably just a matter of time before this wears out. One thing that I am going to do in the future is put some spur grommets on the bottom here, maybe 2 of them. Like I've said before in another video, those spur grommets are not that expensive, but the tool is, you know, the tool to set them is. So after I make a few more pouches and can justify, you know, spending that money, I'll be setting some spur grommets. Probably 2 in this one in the pouch I made before. And another thing I'm gonna upgrade is I'm just gonna cut these tabs off of the metal zipper sliders, because they, you know, even with this paracord on there, they rattle kind of a lot. So I'll cut these tabs off and just have some sort of simple zipper pull. I might do a zipper pull made out of paracord that's kind of woven like a paracord bracelet. I've seen people do that online. I thought that was a cool idea. Otherwise, there's plenty of commercial zipper pulls you can buy. I think one I was looking at was made by Exotac, and it can be pulled off of the zipper and uses fire tinder in emergency. I thought that was a cool idea. I probably won't go that route, but I thought that was cool. And probably the last thing that I will do different was when we attached our bottom panel to our top panel here, we didn't really cover the seam at all. In retrospect, you know, I probably could have just folded some grosgrain ribbon over that. I was looking at some other bags. I have a Black Hawk bag that's, you know, pretty much done the same way, where the seam is uncovered, and, you know, that's held up through the years just fine. So, you know, I suppose this one would do too, but I suppose this one will hold up just as well. But some of the other bags I was looking at is my 511 bag. You know, it had 2 layers on the bottom panel, like I was talking about before, And this seam actually disappears in between those two layers, and that's how that stays protected. And then I got, you know, a condor pouch that has, you know, just grosgrain ribbon covering that up. I figure it might be kind of hard to sew through the grosgrain ribbon and the zipper and the cordura, you know, but in retrospect, I didn't even give it a try, and I probably should have. You know, if anything, I could have probably hand cranked the sewing machine through all that material if I had to. So the next pouch, I'll just add some grosgrain ribbon right there. And I suppose that's it. I'm on to my next project. If you come across these videos, I hope you found them useful. I don't monetize these. I'm not making any kind of money off of these, at least not yet. I was genuinely just trying to help people who wanted to make a similar project. I came across several videos of similar projects on YouTube that were helpful to me, but they weren't exactly like the project I had in mind. So I hope these videos might help you the way those videos helped me. And I'm on to my next project.